The only reason Dr. Lutzker's done anything like that is students like Kate Guastafaro and fellows like, fellow in the academic sense, like Jill Filene. It's really an honor to be here. My cherished colleague, Mark Chaffin, got me interested in this group in the first place, and I believe is one of the founders, and he loved it. There's nothing like a boutique conference with really smart people, and been to as many conferences as I have, and this is it, where you talk to people and you sit down at lunch and you learn about what's going on. So I'm learning today, and it's a pleasure to learn from all of you. Does this show the cursor? Oh, it does. In single case design, actually, you terribly need to point at things, so this is good.
Can you hear him in the back?
Can you hear me okay? Just better? Worse? Okay, I'll just talk and John will fiddle.
I'll translate this way.
So single case research design was used in the development and evaluation of the SafeCare modules and their variants, and SafeCare's predecessor, about which maybe someone's heard, Project 12 Ways. In this group, I doubt that I need to remind very many people, though, for example, I'm very steeped in single case design. We choose designs based on our research questions, not our preference for a given kind of design, and I'm pleased to listen to the ways that certain designs have evolved. And what you do if you're somebody like I who has limited talent but figured out how to get money over the years is you hire people to figure out what designs you need when you haven't a clue once you get beyond single case design. So here's some basic precepts of single case design. Like group designs or any of the kind of designs we've talked about today, what you ultimately need to do is have confidence that your intervention was in fact responsible for any behavior change seen and not some other events. A key precept of single case design is repeated measurement, and usually not only repeated but direct observation. I know your name, but I forgot your name because, anyway, it was mentioned earlier. And I'll give you a couple of examples in a minute that single case design, while called that, doesn't have to mean an N of 1. In fact, there's an axiom in the field. People always say, well, how many replications do you need of a single case design to determine some sort of effectiveness? And the axiom goes 1, to convince yourself, 2, to convince your colleagues, and 3, to publish. But that's not really so, but in any case, it can, but doesn't necessarily mean an N of 1. What it does do, and why I think it's especially important to consider as we talk about precision home visiting, is that it gives you an understanding of the individual, of the participant, pretty much like no other design can. It gives you flexibility, which I heard in other descriptions today too, and was very pleased to hear, until you get it right, particularly in medicine. I was hearing that. It does not have good external validity. That's for other designs. It has excellent internal validity. And here's the thing about single case design, and at least 2 federal agencies I know wisely asked for help in establishing criteria for looking at single case designs, and they used peers to do it. However, a basic precept of single case design is the data tell you what to do. So you can't have any preset criteria about what a good single case design looks like. In fact, the only thing to do sort of a priori, it's generally established that your baseline should have stability, or if they don't have stability, they should be on a declining trend if you're looking to increase a behavior, or be increasing if you're looking to decrease a behavior. But you just can't say how many baseline sessions, for example, you're going to need. The data will tell you. And similarly with what you do beyond baseline. So there's high internal validity in a well-done single case design. The more replications, the better, despite my little axiom for 3. And you can do in a particular design that I'll show you. How many of you are generally familiar with single case designs? Okay. You can do it across participants, you can do them across behaviors, or across time. For precision, you need to have reliability, and as has been alluded in other talks today, you have to have observed fidelity. Turns out that fidelity has a rather broad range of definition within the kind of work we all do. You should have live or digital coaching. You need regular, repeated data collection, and you should look at adaptations. This is a real home. Now, some researchers, how many social workers are there here? Any? Some of you have been in a home like this, right? Yes? Raise your hand. Okay, yes. That's a real neglect urban environment. I use this in part to really let you know what we're talking about when we're talking about abuse and neglect. And this is, in fact, a neglect home. And, you know, the 2016 trend data just came out, and it's 72% of referrals in this country for child maltreatment are still neglect. And neglect is the least declining among sexual abuse, physical abuse, and among sexual and physical abuse. I give this as an example too. If you we have something called the Home Accident Prevention Inventory. Get in, you take a quick count of the hazards in the room. You can't run 13 baseline sessions waiting for stability in the numbers on the Home Accident Prevention Inventory in this kitchen. It would be wholly unethical to do so. These are the only fake data. I don't think I ever called them fake today, but that's sort of a common term. And I use these only to, because they're perfect, and you never see perfect data in high-risk family homes or in child maltreatment referred homes. But this is an example of a single case research design. In this case, it would be a multiple baseline design across 3 families. And you see you only get behavior change when the intervention occurs. Actually, I'd like to go back to data I just showed, but this reflects the first time I ever tried to really tweak a slide without the help. I've been doing PowerPoints for 25 years, no, 30, however long, with help. And now I'm living in California. I try not to bother the assistants in Georgia, and this is what you get. You should be proud of me. It's not terrible, right?
You're right.
So here is the logic to basic single case designs. First of all, another thing it is what we call the eyeball test. The data should be so. Well, I didn't want that, but it's good enough. The data should be so clear. So these are real. How do you go back?
Okay, use the arrows.
Oh, that. Okay, thank you. So the data should be so clear that your eyeball tells you, without anything else, that the intervention is responsible for the change. Now, if you just do A-B, that is, all you have is a baseline and an intervention, your eyeball may hint to you or certainly tell you, but you don't have confidence because you're missing the rest of what is in the logic of a single case design. So first of all, there is prediction. So what you're doing in a single case design, whichever design it is predicting that if we hadn't, these are intervention lines, these slashed lines always represent intervention lines. So if we hadn't intervened in family A, the prediction is it would have just stayed like this. It would have looked just like baseline, right? But then you intervene with family B sometime after you see change in family A, and thus you have validated this prediction. Right now, these data are only A-B data. They stand alone. But you introduce a third family, and you get the same phenomenon staggered down over time, And there's no other explanation now that other than it was the intervention. So you have prediction logic, and the goal is to validate your prediction of lack of lack of change without the intervention. And then what you get in some designs is maintenance. You can only really demonstrate maintenance in what are called ABA or ABAB designs. But and then there are other designs that I'll briefly allude to. I wanted to show you one that was sort of interesting because it was a person with a parent with intellectual disabilities. But I'm not going to take the time to do that. I could talk to you about it later. But so those are the basics. There's also something called the changing criterion design and the alternative treatment designs that sort of resemble designs that you know to ferret out factors that may be influencing the behavior change. But the very most common ones, because they're the easiest to do and they don't require going back to baseline or some variation of that, are the multiple baseline designs. So as far as not necessarily one, this is a group of 9 preschool children, actually. It's the only one like it I've done, so I chose to use it. And has nothing to do with high-risk families, but it's 9 preschool children whose data are combined. And it had to do with wondering if, based on an observation that when children were read what we came to call moral books, that is, books that ultimately are trying to teach a child what's good, what to do right, but in doing so graphically describe bad behavior, guess what? The kids imitate the bad behavior. So we just subjected, or I shouldn't say subjected, the kids were read over a number of days. In a single case design, each datum point represents a session. Kids were read books without so-called moral content. There was next to no negative verbal or negative physical behavior. And then when they were read books designed to change their behavior, it turns out it did, but it wasn't for the better, and particularly physical. If it showed hitting or pushing or other spitting or whatever, that's what the kids picked up on. Their salient, I guess, their salient events, and kids notice. And then we simply went back to neutral books, and you see the bad behavior dropped off. All this work I've done for 40 some odd years in child maltreatment, I've had some attention in the press, but nothing got the attention in the press like this did. So here's another, not necessarily one. There's another design with which many of you are familiar called time series analysis, and many of you have familiar with it without the context of single case design, but those of us in the field believe it's just a good example of a single case design where you do use a statistic, but first and foremost your eyeball tells you in the first place. These are appointments at a student the N in this study was 55,000, and these were a year's worth of data prior to I'm not going to call it an intervention, it was just something the administration did because they were very tired of students missing appointments and not calling to tell the clinic at the university that they were missing the appointment. So they instituted a service fee that they took from the student's account if they missed an appointment. And this came about sort of serendipitously. The doc of the director of the center was a friend of ours, and we were having dinner and drinks, and he said, you know, the administration put this administration fee in, and I really think it's working to cut down visits without, canceled visits without calling. And I said, you know, there's a way we could look at that. And that's where those data come from. But right now we have some data in San Diego County where with an intervention in the past 7 years, out-of-home placements have declined by 54%. It's just want for a time series analysis. I was at USC recently. A student came up to me and said, "Dr. Lutzker, got any dissertation ideas for me?" I said, "Yeah, do a time series analysis of those San Diego County data." As I said, there's just not great. Oh, thank you. There's just not great external validity. You have to do other kinds of large studies for external validity. I'm going the right way now. Yes, this was published. It was my first MPH thesis at Georgia State University. Julie Jobley did this, and it was using. We have this. We've long had an intervention for home safety, where the home visitor goes in and helps the family learn how to remove accessible hazards in the home, accessible to children. In this case, a smartphone helped in that Julie taught the mothers to video the rooms and then gave her text feedback as to how she was doing. And you can see, again, these are large numbers of hazards. In this case, for example, in the family, in the bathroom, on average, it looks like 30 some odd accessible hazards. And then after the intervention, none. And we tend, most of the time, we tend to get data that look like this in home safety. But this was, actually, it was a multiple baseline across 3 families, across families and across rooms, replicated across families, and pretty clearly showing that there was some real value in exploring more how we could use technology to facilitate the home visiting. This was, Jill, to borrow your glasses or use mine. This was the first. No, it wasn't the first published, but this was one of the earlier studies on teaching parents healthcare skills. And it, too, is a multiple baseline, in this case, across two mothers. And what you see, and one of the things we did early on in most of our modules is that we introduced written materials first without the rest of the intervention, because they're inherent in the intervention. So in a way, it's a little control group right there in actually in this case, 1 session. And what we found was, in several cases, I guess the mom demonstrated some skill, at least in one case, in one kind of behavior with written materials, but in the rest of the baseline trials, there was or sessions, there was not criterion performance until the full intervention was implemented. Ultimately, what we're trying to teach is diagnose a disorder, decide whether to self-treat, make a medical appointment, or go to the emergency department. Now this won't move at all. It's frozen, apparently. This is a multiple baseline across skill sets. Yes, this is a mother with intellectual disabilities learning our parent-infant interaction skills. And we enhance training with digital frames based on the principle of self-modeling, whereby we showed her as a part of intervention, or as intervention, photos of herself with her baby engaged in the skills we wanted her to learn. We posed her in the pictures, and she was able to control the digital frame any time of day, any day. And you see that she really developed very quick acquisition of the skills. The multiple baseline design was across across physical behaviors that were taught first, and then non-physical behaviors which were taught second. And then we replicated that. Kate and I replicated that with several different mothers. Other designs are something called changing criterion, which can learn about later, in alternating treatment designs. I like this study because it actually is at once a changing criterion design where we kept giving a parent, this was also a parent with intellectual disabilities, but referred for child neglect, and we kept giving her new goals for making her home safer. But at once, it was a multiple baseline across settings within the home. So it's especially robust demonstration that she was, that the intervention was working, and I did it too. I'm done.